Hey everyone, it is Airtime Exia coming at you after a long-term hiatus. I recently just got back from a trip to Disney World where I ended up going to Magic Kingdom for the first time in almost 20 years, Animal Kingdom and Epcot again, so that ended up giving me completion of all US Disney parks, and with that I wanted to start up a little series where I'd go through and rank every single attraction at the parks and put them up on a tier list and then end up comparing them against each other. Once we go through all the parks, gonna throw them all up onto a big massive tier list, really separate like what I think are the best Disney rides versus some of the lesser good or like worst Disney rides. So I'm gonna start today with the most visited theme park in the world, the Magic Kingdom, and without any further ado, let's get started on it right here. So very first one, we're going to go ahead and get started with the People Mover. This one's a definite A tier for me. Very unfortunate that that Disneyland no longer has this. However, I'm still really glad it's at Disney World. It's just a classic, super fun ride that you just get to really take in Tomorrowland. And it really is awesome to see how just like good Tomorrowland looks with the People Mover, and at Disneyland with all the new additions and renovations it's had. Being able to explore it through the People Mover is really cool, and having some of the extra stuff like the show scenes or the looking into the rides, like you pass through Space Mountain or through Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster, stuff like that is really cool and really unique. So gonna go definitely A tier right with that one. Next up, another Tomorrowland one. Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, definite C tier, probably my least favorite of the dark rides at Magic Kingdom. Not awful, but just definitely under Disney's standard, much more in line with some of the lesser like rides. Like I'd put this on almost on par with something like Boo Blasters or something like that. It's not awful, and that like speed tunnel's really fun, really cool. But it could definitely be better. Being able to control like where you're spinning and where you're angling is fun, but I just didn't really care for it this time around. I liked it better at Disneyland, but they're pretty similar. I just didn't like it this time really. Next up, I'm gonna knock out a bunch of the Dumbo style rides. So put them though like regular Dumbo in D, Aladdin's Flying Carpets also in D. And then next up, Astro Orbiter, put it in lower C tier. So these are just really simple, really basic rides. If you're young, it's a definite must-do, but for me personally, I just don't really get anything out of them. Astro Orbiter's cool because you get to take the elevator up, and it's so high above like the rest of Tomorrowland. It's only like 40 feet or so, but it's still really cool being that high up, and it just seems a little bit faster, a little bit cooler. So that one gets elevated up to that C tier position. Another Tomorrowland classic ride. We got Tomorrowland Speedway. That one's also going to be in about C tier, where it's just a fun car ride. It seems a little bit cooler, a little bit bigger scale than your typical like antique car rides that you can find at like Kings Island, Cedar Point, etc. So it's definitely a better one, but it's still pretty much an antique car ride where it's good for kids, but for me personally, there are other rides that I really look forward to instead. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and do Tron. This one is a definite S tier. I'm a huge fan of Tron Legacy and just the Tron series in general. So even if this ride wasn't that great, as long as I had like good theming and everything, it would be just a out of the park, just win for me. But however, this was a really great ride, great launch. Really smooth, has an awesome, the ride vehicles are just awesome. They really enhance the ride experience. There's even little pops of like floater airtime throughout the ride, and just the theming, and being able to ride this, especially if you can get on it at night with the light up like grid canopy, that really adds onto the ride, where it just makes it one of the best rides in the entire Walt Disney World, in the entirety of Walt Disney World. So definitely S tier. I was lucky enough to get 2 rides on this, and very happy that it was up there. Probably not as good as say something like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. Just doesn't also have like a lot of the show scenes. It's not as long. There's not as many physical sets, where this is kind of like a step in between like Rock and Roller Coaster and Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. But it definitely put it at S tier for Magic Kingdom. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and do Enchanted Tiki Room. This one, I initially this is one I did when I last went when I was like 6 or so, where I did it where it was under new management. So wasn't really a huge fan of that one even as a kid. And then going and doing the version at Disneyland, I thought that one was way better. But with this one, they have since revamped it. I don't know exactly when they changed it back into like the classic version, but it's so much better when it's at this classic version where it doesn't just shoehorn IP in. I'm not like a Disney purist where everything has to be exactly how Walt Disney like kind of conceived it, but just ultimately having it more closer to the original while still being expanded and different still, I think personally makes it a better attraction. So I'm going to put that in B tier, just with all those classic animatronics and everything, and returning to that classic form. Speaking of another Walt Disney classic, I'm going to do Carousel of Progress. That one's going to go right alongside with it, where it's this nice classic Walt Disney attraction that he personally worked on. I know this one has moved twice since his initial working on it, so but it still is mostly the same. They update it here and there, but definitely has that charm to it that a lot of other rides don't. Next up, I'm going to do Philharmagic. This one's a good, I'm going to put this at top of D tier. It's just a fun little 3D like movie. Just a fun 3D movie where the screen progressively keeps getting bigger, changing aspect ratios throughout it, where that's really cool, how it just expands throughout, and you even have like a little bit of a Donald Duck animatronic there at the end. Nothing crazy, but it's definitely a good way to, spend 15-20 minutes while you're waiting for, your next fast pass or your meal or something, which that's what we used it for. It usually doesn't have much longer of a wait than, waiting for your turn to get into the theater. So next up, going to do Teacups. This one is going to be bottom of C tier. I just find this a little bit more enjoyable than, say, like Dumbo or the Flying Carpets of Agrabah. They're pretty similar in terms of just they're pretty standard off-the-shelf flat rides, but I think this one's a little bit more enjoyable. Just you can have more fun with it if you're into spinning, and I think it's a little bit more just enjoyable to do with like a friend or a partner or whatever. So I'm going to put that in C tier. And then another roller coaster. Let's go with Big Thunder. This one's going to be high of A tier for me. This one I didn't think was as good as the Disneyland version. However, I still think it was really good. It felt like a little bit tightly condensed, where it just had to be in a really small footprint. But I still think it was really, really fun. And overall, just one of the better or best mine trains that I had been on, period. The story and the effects are better on the Disneyland version, but once again, still definite A tier ride at this park, and one of the best mine trains in the world, with just the amount of theming and how it's actually still pretty aggressive for a mine train. Not the most aggressive, but still definitely a really, really good one. And then next up, we got the Disney World Walt Disney Railroad. I'm going to put that in high C tier, and then bump this down to like here for Buzz Lightyear. This Disney World Railroad is not quite as good as the Disneyland version. I think the stations aren't just laid out the best to use it as like a transportation around the park. It's really fun to be able to see like new different angles of stuff like Big Thunder Mountain, or the backside of like go under Tron, or behind Space Mountain. Like that's really cool. However, it doesn't have like the Grand Canyon diorama or the Primeval World diorama that Disneyland has. So it's not as good as that one, but it's still it's a train ride. It's going to be a good way to get around the park if, that's roughly where you're able to get. But so it fits right in there in C tier. Next up, we will do another transport ride with the Columbia Steamship. That one's also going to be going in mid of C tier. That one, this one is just one I don't prioritize too well. Like, it's really cool that you have a full-on steamship that is able to travel around Tom Sawyer Island. That's really cool. I wish I could get around to it more, but it's just not a huge priority for me. So, gonna keep that right there at C. And then next up, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. That's gonna be mid-T. Just get nothing out of this ride, or something like Turtle Talk with Crush at Epcot. Just those kind of rides. Where you just kind of interact with like a CGI dude who's controlling it. Not really too much for me. and I think it's something where I think at this point they should try to replace it with something. I think that would be a better use for it at this point, but I don't know what could go there. And then next up, we're going to do the carousel, the Fantasyland carousel. This one's going to be another D tier ride. Big thing with this one is it has the sword and stone out front. That's a really cool feature. And then also it's got the insane stroller parking on the back that just clutters up the entire front part of Fantasyland. So a little bit annoying, and there's just a carousel outside of it, but it's just a pretty standard typical ride where unfortunately you're going to be waiting a good bit more for a carousel than you would be at any other park. But hey, it's Disney. It's what you're kind of signing up for when you go. Next up, got Jungle Cruise. This one's a definite A tier ride. It's going to depend on kind of your skipper and whether or not like how funny they are, and that also depends on what type of humor you have. Past couple times I've had really good skippers, really funny ones that, you know, I'm laughing the entire time. Me and my girlfriend are laughing the entire time, where it doesn't seem like the rest of our boat is really into the same jokes, or just maybe they don't understand it. You know, it all is going to depend on your type of humor, but I always just laugh. It always seems that that kind of dry, stupid humor is right up my alley. So I'm gonna put that definitely at A. And with all the sets and everything, lot of fun. And then next up, we got Winnie the Pooh, the Mini Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This one I'm going to put at the top of B tier. This one I definitely thought was better than the one at Disneyland. It just seemed, with the line having the interactive elements, and it seemed like the theming was a little bit more consistent. It was, the layout of the ride was a little bit better thought out of than the Disneyland versions. I know that these are both replacements of previous existing rides, with the Disneyland version being a replacement of their Country Bear Jamboree, and this one being a replacement of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. They obviously couldn't be the exact one-for-one same rides if they were using mostly the same building. However, I think that just works out a little bit better here. They're still pretty simple rides, but I definitely really enjoy them. And then for another pretty simple dark ride, I'm going to put right alongside it, I'm going to put the Journey of the Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, I think is what this one's called. They have slightly different names between the Disney California Adventure and the Disney World Magic Kingdom version, but they're ultimately very similar rides, just with a better facade out front for the Magic Kingdom version, and that's going to help it keep up at B. And then I also felt that some of the transitions were a little bit better. It just seemed a little bit better themed out through all, where the Disney California Adventure version I felt just kind of put you in the dark a little bit in between the scenes. However, I do prefer it when these dark rides have, like, if they're going to be retelling a movie or having like theme to a movie, that they tell like a complete story. However, you know, this one's missing out on like the final battle where like Prince Eric hits Ursula with the ship. I know that was probably maybe a little bit too big of a scale, but it seems to like skip kind of through. But I still, overall, each of the scenes are really nice, and I prefer this to something like Frozen Ever After, where it seems like just kind of clip show throughout the songs, or like a meet and greet as a ride. So I prefer that as I prefer this to something like Frozen Ever After, but definitely high B tier for that. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and do Haunted Mansion. This one is going right under Tron for the S tier as well. One of the best Disneyland and Disney World dark rides of all time. Both parks near perfect, where you have this nice, great combination of spookiness and fun, where I think it's really great how just it still holds up all these years later. I know a lot of people complain about the newer Hatbox Ghost not really fitting in with the Magic Kingdom version. I didn't really care. I thought it was good and didn't really stick out anymore. But one of my favorite rides of all time has been for decades at this point now, and still really holds up. And I hope they keep holding on to this one for as long as possible. Next up, gonna do the Barnstormer. This one's gonna be I'm gonna put this in low B tier. Really simple, kind of just Vekoma Junior coaster. Nothing too crazy. Nothing. It's what you can find at a lot of parks, or something very similar for their like kiddie coasters. Like Cedar Point has a very comparable one. Even something like Universal Islands of Adventure has something very similar to it with Flight of the Hippogriff. So pretty standard ride, but it's a good introduction. All right, and then connecting in with that, we got the next coaster on our list, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. This is a nice step up from Barnstormer. However, one thing, this is a good coaster. It's got some good theming. It's nice and smooth. That swinging aspect to it, I think, was a little bit better and a little bit more noticeable than I thought it would be. It's not as, swinging as much as something like a suspended coaster, but it definitely wasn't completely unnoticeable. The different turns and twists and everything definitely swung the car from side to side in a unique way, and the theming was say the mine scene or the cottage scene at the end with Snow White dancing with the dwarves. That was something that where it was really really nice and really unique. However, it definitely had a lot to be desired in terms of just like how thrilling and how short the just the actual coaster sections were on this ride. So I'm gonna put this just above Tiki Room. All right, got that all fixed up, and next up we got Small World right here. I'm going to go ahead and put that right in between Seven Dwarves and Tiki Room. So this is a nice, another classic Disney dark ride. I don't think the song is as annoying as a lot of people make it out to be, especially because it's in different languages throughout the vast majority of it, where you really only hear the English version for like a minute at the beginning until you or at the end with the whole just everyone coming together to sing it in English. I really really enjoyed this ride, and I like how this one doesn't have a lot of the licensed Disney characters. Like you have like Toy Story characters in the Wild West section of the Disneyland version. I like how this one is much more classic in terms of that design. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that right in the B section. All right, up next I'm going to go ahead and do Peter Pan's Flight. I'm going to go ahead and put that with the other kind of Fantasyland dark rides with Winnie the Pooh and Little Mermaid. This one has a little bit of an issue where it can often be just an insane wait for it. But if you can get on it in a timely manner, I think it's a really fun dark ride where yes, it could be updated, but having that suspended, like the suspended galleons going throughout it, that initial London scene is genuinely still incredible all these years later. And then the way they set up that like final like battle on Captain Hook's ship, I think is really cool. How you have one set of scenes before you turn around that main mast, the main sail, and then you have a second scene when you go around it. It's a really good use of space and blocking out just what your scenes are, and it still holds up all these years later. If they could do what they've done to say like Alice in Wonderland or Snow White over at Disneyland, and really add in some like projections or like backdrops, like screen backdrops and stuff like they have with that one, I think that would really add to it. But even still, I still think this is a really good dark ride all these years later, and the best of the Fantasyland dark rides in my opinion. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and do the Swiss Family Treehouse. This one's going to be a bottom of C tier, where it's a good walkthrough attraction in the middle of the day. I think it's a really fun one. Just go ahead and take your time off on and just spend some time walking through it. It's usually not got a line to it, and it's never really too crowded, so you can go ahead, take your time here if you're heading from like Pirates to Main Street or whatever. If you're heading to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, whenever it opens, go ahead and hit it up on the way. It's a fun little time, but it's not as good as say Disneyland's Adventureland Treehouse at this point. So I'm gonna put it in C tier, and then out of the final two, gonna go ahead and these are both easy S tiers. Where you got original Space Mountain. This one I didn't think was as good as say Disneyland's one. I think Disneyland's is just more intense. It's faster. It's got more airtime. Having that onboard audio really helps it out, and also with being like glass smooth really helps it out. However, this one's still just awesome. You still get great pops of airtime in the back. It's still fast. It's got great theming throughout it. You have the two different tracks, so you have two different experiences to go through. All that other stuff definitely makes it one of the best Disney coasters, and argue in my opinion before Tron opened, easily the best in Magic Kingdom in my opinion before Tron's opening. And then Pirates of the Caribbean, I was a little bit reluctant writing this initially before, because I knew that this had the update where it had Jack Sparrow and Barbossa, and they updated a lot of the ride compared to the Disneyland version, which is just a stone cold classic where it's the last ride Walt Disney had such a great hand working with and putting out there before his death. That one's largely unchanged at Disneyland at this point. However, after riding this a handful of times on my last trip to Magic Kingdom, on my most recent trip to Magic Kingdom, I'd say that the Orlando version's better. You may have more references to the movies. However, that doesn't get rid of the impact of the ride. The scale of it just feels bigger. The ship battle and that fort battle just feels bigger. The Jack Sparrow animatronics and the Barbossa and a lot of the animatronics just seem to run better. They seem to look a lot better. Where especially that last Captain Jack Sparrow animatronic where he's in the treasure room is one of the best animatronics outside of, say, the Kylo Ren one or the Navi Shamaness or whatever you want to call it at the end of Navi River Journey. Those are obviously a little bit more impressive because they're the next gen versions. However, I would definitely say that up until then, that Jack Sparrow animatronic is genuinely phenomenal and it really adds to the ride. And overall, I'd just give the slight edge of Pirates to the Disney World version over the Disneyland version, even though the Disneyland version is the Walt Disney original. So overall, this is going to be my final rank out of what I would consider are kind of the elite attractions or anything above A. Anything above A are absolute must do's. But even still, all of these are still pretty good attractions. Anything above D is well worth your time. C upwards is definitely well worth your time to go and experience. So if you guys have any of your own comments or suggestions how you would rank these up, leave them down in the comments. I'm also going to include the link for your own ability to rank these up, and I'd like you guys to share them down in the comments as well, how you guys would rank these up and really choose which rides at Disney World, Magic Kingdom you guys think are better or best, or where I'm wrong in comparison. So this is Airtime Exia signing out.